She was just replacing the maid until she opened the wrong door. A quiet stranger, a secret past, and a love neither of them saw coming. Anna Wilson was used to the sound of clocks ticking past midnight. At 27, she had long given up the dream of sleeping 8 hours a night. Between the local diner and her evening shift at the grocery store, time had become something she borrowed but never owned. She lived in a quiet corner of Georgia, a town where gossip moved faster than traffic, and everyone knew your mother's maiden name. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't fair, but it was home. That Thursday evening, she was halfway through folding laundry when her phone buzzed. Lisa. Her best friend's name flashed across the screen, followed by a frantic voice. Anna, I need a huge favor, please. Lisa was coughing, clearly sick. I'm supposed to be at the Reed estate in an hour. I can't make it. Can you go instead? Just for tonight, please. I'll owe you forever. Anna blinked. The Reed estate? That was local legend. Everyone knew about it. Gated, silent, grand. And Daniel Reed, he was the mystery man in town. Wealthy, private. No one really knew him, but people talked. Anna had never even been near the gates. I've never cleaned a house like that, Anna said hesitantly. You won't have to do much. Just dust the library, tidy the kitchen. He won't even talk to you. Please, Anna, I'm desperate. There was a pause. Then Anna sighed, pressing her fingers to her temple. All right, one night. She had no idea that night would change her life. By 6:30 p.m., Anna had pulled on her neatest shirt, tied her hair back, and climbed into her beat-up Honda. As she drove past pine trees and open fields, her heart tapped against her ribs like a warning bell. The sun was low, casting golden streaks across the landscape. The air was still, eerily calm. Her tires crunched gravel as she approached the iron gates of the Reed property. They creaked open automatically, like they'd been expecting her. The estate stood like a sleeping king, white stone walls glowing in the dusk, tall Greek columns rising like soldiers. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a secret. Anna swallowed. She walked up the long stone steps and raised her hand to knock just once. The door opened before her knuckles touched the wood. And there he was, Daniel Reed. She froze. He wasn't what she expected. No suit, no fancy watch. He wore a simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows. His chestnut brown hair was pushed back, slightly messy, like he'd just run his fingers through it. But his eyes, quiet, stormy, and deep, were what caught her off guard. Eyes that had seen too much and said too little. You're not Lisa, he said, voice low and calm. His words weren't rude, just factual, emotionless. No, I'm Anna, her friend. She's sick. I'm just here for tonight. He looked at her for a long moment, almost like he was measuring her soul. Then finally, a nod. All right. You can start with the living room and kitchen. Don't worry about upstairs. She stepped forward. But then he added, almost as an afterthought, just don't go into the master bedroom. Anna blinked. Okay, sure. But something in his tone was different. Not strict. Not warning. Almost haunted. She wanted to ask why, but she wasn't being paid to ask questions, so she nodded. And just like that, the door shut behind her. The silence inside was heavier than the air outside. The marble floor echoed beneath her shoes. The walls were lined with artwork, some classic, some strange. The house smelled of cedar wood and something older, like forgotten memories. Anna set down her bag and took a deep breath. It was just one night, a favor for a friend. But in the back of her mind, something whispered that this was no ordinary house. And Daniel Reed was no ordinary man. The clock ticked softly somewhere far away. Anna Wilson moved quietly through the house, her footsteps muffled by polished wood floors and expensive rugs. It was the kind of silence that pressed on your ears, as if the house itself didn't like being disturbed. She had started in the living room, tidying pillows, wiping down glass surfaces, and dusting bookshelves filled with hardcovers that looked untouched. The space was elegant, almost too perfect, like it had been decorated for a magazine but not for living. Daniel Reed had disappeared upstairs without another word. Anna found herself oddly aware of her own breathing, as if she had to be quieter than normal, as if the walls were listening. She walked into the dining room next. The long oak table could seat 10, but only one chair had signs of use. She swept under it, noting the strange stillness of the home. No clocks ticking on the walls. No hum of a TV in another room. No music. Just quiet, and the faint scent of old paper and cedar. As she reached the kitchen, the silence became heavier. She wiped the counters slowly, the way someone might polish a piece of art they didn't understand. Everything was neat, no dishes in the sink, no crumbs on the floor. A silver fruit bowl sat on the counter, empty. It felt like a place where time had stopped. Finished, she stretched her back and stepped into the hallway, ready to return to the front room and maybe call Lisa to check in. But then she saw it. At the end of the hallway, a door, slightly open, and from within, a soft golden light, the master bedroom. Her heart tapped louder. He said not to go in there. The words echoed in her mind like a warning. But the way he'd said it hadn't been angry. It had been hollow, like a man guarding something precious or painful. Anna stood frozen for a moment. She told herself to keep walking, to respect his space, to be the professional friend who just did the job and left. But her feet moved forward. The closer she got, the warmer the light seemed, like late afternoon sunshine trapped in a bottle. The air near the door was different too, heavier, like it carried memories. She touched the door lightly. It creaked open with a whisper. Anna stepped in, and everything changed. The room was beautiful. Warm amber tones, deep wooden floors, a large bed with a soft cream-colored comforter, heavy curtains pulled half open. Everything was calm, serene even. But it was the far wall that stopped her in her tracks. It was covered in photographs. Not just one or two, but dozens. Carefully framed, arranged in no particular order, as if each one had a different story to tell. Some were old, some black and white. Others were fading with time. One photo stood out, centered, larger than the others, in a delicate gold frame. It showed a black woman in a yellow dress, laughing as she held a curly-haired little boy on her lap. The boy's smile was wide, his eyes bright, his skin light, but his features unmistakably hers. Under the photo was a small label, handwritten in neat cursive. "Me and Mom, 1990. Anna's breath caught. That little boy? Was Daniel Reed? Her hand covered her mouth as she stared. The strong, quiet, mysterious man downstairs, he was biracial. She felt a strange chill, not from fear, but from revelation, from the weight of this truth hidden inside a house built on silence. A truth he hadn't spoken, but preserved. The room wasn't just a bedroom. It was a shrine. Every photo, every object, every folded blanket spoke of a deep, aching love. A love protected from the world outside. Anna stepped closer. Her fingers hovered near the photo, afraid to touch, but desperate to understand. There were others. Birthday parties, beach days, reading books under trees. Daniel's mom in all of them. Always smiling, always holding her son close. It didn't feel like a room of grief. It felt like a room of reminders. A mother who mattered. A part of Daniel's identity that had been hidden, but never forgotten. Why had he never mentioned her? Why did he tell her not to come in here? And why was he hiding this part of himself from the world? Questions swirled like smoke in her chest. But before she could think more, she heard footsteps. Heavy, slow, coming down the hallway. Anna turned, her heart leaping into her throat. It was him. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching her. Expression unreadable, arms crossed, shoulders tense. Her lips parted, but no words came out. He didn't speak either. For a moment, they just stood there. The light between them, the photographs behind her, and the truth hanging in the air. Anna's breath caught in her throat. The warm glow from the bedroom's golden light now felt colder, dimmer. The air was no longer peaceful. It was electric. She turned slowly toward the doorway. There he was. Daniel Reed stood there, still and tall, his frame taking up the entire space. His arms were at his sides, but his posture was tense, like a man who'd just walked into a room filled with ghosts. His eyes locked on hers, calm, but guarded, hurt, but unreadable. Anna's heart pounded. She could barely swallow. I'm sorry, she stammered, stepping away from the photo wall like she'd touched something sacred. I didn't mean to pry. I just saw the photo and— You saw my mother, Daniel said, cutting her off gently. The room held its breath. He stepped inside, his shoes quiet on the wooden floor. He didn't look at the photos. He looked at her. That's what this room is about, he continued, voice soft but heavy. It's all hers. These walls, her laugh, her touch, her stories. It's all here. Everything else in this house is for show. This is the only part of it that's real. Anna stood silently, arms crossed, fingers trembling slightly. She's beautiful, she said, her voice barely a whisper. You look like her. Daniel looked down, his gaze falling on the carpet. I used to tell her that, he replied with a dry smile. When I was little, she'd laugh, said I had her eyes but my father's stubbornness. There was a pause. Anna took a careful step closer. Why hide her, Daniel? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over to the gold-framed photo, the one of his mother holding him as a child. He stared at it like he was watching a memory in motion. Because people wouldn't accept her, he said finally. They didn't even try. His voice cracked just barely. This town, he continued, smiled to her face but whispered behind her back. Called her names, said she didn't belong here, that I didn't belong here. When my father died, his family tried to correct the mistake, took the money, took the house, tried to take me too. And when my mom died— He looked up at Anna, eyes shining but dry. They erased her. Anna felt a tear burn at the corner of her eye. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Daniel let out a breath like he'd been holding it for 10 years. I built all of this. He gestured at the house, the estate, the silence. On my own, every inch, every brick. And I kept this room locked because it's the only piece of her they couldn't take. Anna looked at the photos again. The love in them was overwhelming. There was so much life in each frame, so much affection. It was a history, hidden away. I don't understand how anyone could be ashamed of her, she said, voice trembling. She radiates warmth, joy. She was the bravest woman I've ever known, Daniel said quietly, and I've been a coward for keeping her a secret. Anna turned toward him, her eyes filled with something deeper now, not just curiosity, but compassion. You're not a coward, she said. You're just protecting something that matters. And that's not weakness, Daniel. That's love. He blinked at her as if surprised by her words. Then came silence, but not the awkward kind. This one was charged, personal, real. Anna felt her heart squeeze as she saw something shift behind Daniel's guarded expression. Pain turned to vulnerability. Walls began to crack. And for the first time, Daniel Reed looked human. Not the mysterious, silent man the town whispered about, but a boy who missed his mother. A man tired of hiding. A soul waiting to be seen. I didn't expect anyone to ever come into this room, he said softly. Sometimes the heart walks in before the feet do, Anna replied. He gave her the faintest smile, gentle, quiet, but real. You're different, he said. Most people see the house, the name, the money. You saw her. I saw you, Anna said. Something heavy lifted between them, like a door creaking open after years of being locked. A door inside him. And she hadn't forced it. She'd simply knocked and waited. Daniel didn't speak for a long moment. Then, slowly, he walked past her and sat at the edge of the bed. His hands rested on his knees, his fingers slightly curled, tight with thought. The weight of his confession still lingered in the air, thick like fog. He exhaled, long and slow. I've lived a lie for years, Anna, he said softly, without looking at her. Letting the town believe I was just the quiet, rich guy, the distant, mysterious man on the hill. It was easier. His voice wasn't bitter, it was tired, worn. Anna remained standing, her eyes fixed on the man who was unraveling before her, but with strength, not weakness. You shouldn't have to hide who you are, she said gently. Daniel lifted his head and looked at her, really looked at her. Like he was seeing her not as a stranger who entered his house, but someone who had quietly stepped into his soul. "And yet," he said with a bitter smile, "I do. Because even now people whisper. They stare. They ask questions without asking. Some are polite to my face and cruel behind closed doors. You know what that's like, don't you?" Anna's throat tightened. "Yes," she said quietly, "I do." Her voice cracked just slightly. "I grew up on the other side of this town. I've heard the whispers too. But mine were about poverty, about being the girl with holes in her shoes. I was judged before anyone even knew my name." Daniel tilted his head, curious and pained. "So we've both worn invisible masks." "Different masks," Anna said. "But yes, we've both been looked at like something less than what we are." The silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. It was heavy, but beautiful, full. It carried understanding, and something else that neither of them dared name yet. Daniel looked away toward the wall of photographs again. "I kept this room like a secret garden, a place no one could ruin. But sometimes I wonder if keeping it locked has made me forget how to breathe." Anna took a few steps closer, then sat on the edge of the bed beside him. Not touching, just near. "You don't have to live behind locked doors anymore," she said gently. "Not all people will turn away when they see you. Some will lean closer." He turned his head slightly toward her. "And you? What do you see when you look at me?" Anna paused, her chest rising and falling like waves. "I see a man who's hurting but still standing, a man who's had love stolen from him but never stopped loving. I see courage, and I see honesty, even in your silence." Daniel didn't reply, but his jaw loosened, his shoulders eased. "You surprise me," he said finally. "Good surprise or bad?" she asked with a soft smile. He returned the smile barely, but enough. "The kind that makes you want to stop time." They both sat quietly after that, just breathing in the same space. The tension between them had shifted into something warmer, something neither of them had expected that evening. It was no longer about secrets or rooms they weren't supposed to enter. It was about being seen. "Do you ever wish your life had turned out differently?" Anna asked softly. He thought for a long moment before answering. "No," he said, "but I wish I hadn't been afraid to live it fully. I wish I had shown this side of myself sooner. Maybe then, I wouldn't feel so alone." "You're not alone now," she said. Her voice was soft, but the words landed like anchors in the room. Daniel's eyes met hers again, closer now. There was something deeper in his gaze, not just gratitude, not just vulnerability, something blooming, unfolding. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not walking away after what you saw." She gave him a soft laugh. "Daniel, I walked into your forbidden room. I found your heart, not a monster. What kind of person would walk away from something that real?" And in that moment, something passed between them. Not loud, not sudden. Just a shift, a connection, a new thread quietly tying one soul to another. Two people from different worlds. One wealthy, one scraping by. One locked in grief, the other fighting to stay hopeful. But somehow, in this quiet space, their pain matched like puzzle pieces. And in their eyes, in the stillness, in the way their hearts beat just a little faster, there was something new forming. Maybe not love yet, but something that looked like the very first breath of it. The house had changed. Or maybe it was the people in it. The walls still stood silent, the floor still echoed, and the lamps still glowed with soft golden light. But now, the silence no longer felt heavy. It felt safe. Daniel stood from the bed, turning toward Anna, his eyes no longer distant. There was something new there. Warmth. Maybe even trust. He gestured gently toward the hallway. "Come on," he said. "Let me make you something warm. I think we both need it." Anna followed him down the quiet hall, past polished frames and untouched paintings, until they reached the kitchen. It felt less cold now, less perfect, like it belonged to a real person. Daniel opened a cabinet, pulled out 2 mugs, and set a kettle on the stove. "Tea okay?" he asked. Tea's perfect, Anna said, offering him a soft smile. They sat at the small, round kitchen table while the kettle hissed and whistled like a sleepy memory. Outside, the night was silent. Inside, the two of them shared the space like it had always been meant for just this kind of moment. When the tea was ready, he poured gently, handing her a mug with both hands. No clinks, no awkwardness, just quiet kindness. At first, their words were careful, like steps across a frozen lake, but slowly, they found their rhythm. They talked about books. Daniel loved poetry, something he'd never said out loud to anyone in town. Anna loved old novels with torn covers and pages that smelled like history. I used to read under the covers with a flashlight, she said with a shy laugh. Daniel smiled. I did that too. My mom used to find me asleep with the book on my chest. Then came music. Anna adored blues, especially when she was sad. Daniel liked jazz, instrumental, moody, haunting. They talked about childhood. Anna told him about the tiny apartment she grew up in with her mom. 1 bedroom, 1 closet, always just enough food, but never more. Her mom worked 2 jobs and smiled through the exhaustion. I used to tell her I'd grow up and buy her a house, Anna said, her eyes glistening. She'd just laugh and kiss my forehead. Daniel listened quietly, fully, deeply. I think she would have been proud, he said gently. Anna blinked. I haven't heard anyone say that in a long time. Then he told her about his mother, how she used to sing while she cooked, how she danced in the kitchen barefoot, how she wrote him letters when he was little, tucking them under his pillow with tiny origami animals. She was pure light, Daniel said, his voice catching in his throat, even when people tried to dim it. And they talked about loss, that deep, aching kind, the kind that sits quietly behind your ribs for years. Both of them had carried grief in different ways. But somehow the weight felt familiar, like they had both been walking alone for so long, and now had found someone who understood the burden without being told. Time melted between tea and stories and silence that didn't need to be filled. The night grew older. The stars shifted above the trees, and neither of them noticed how late it had become. When Anna finally looked at the clock, she blinked in disbelief. It's past midnight, she said softly. Daniel glanced too and let out a breath. Time's strange, isn't it? When it feels good, it disappears. She nodded, her fingers wrapped around the now empty mug. I should go, she said, but there was no strength behind the words. He stood slowly, not rushing her. I'll walk you to the door. They moved through the house, side by side, their footsteps quiet but in sync. At the front door, he turned to her. The moment felt still, like the world outside had paused, waiting to see what they'd do next. Daniel looked at her, not just with his eyes, but with something deeper. Thank you, he said softly. Anna tilted her head. For what? For seeing me? Those 3 words held more weight than she expected. Not just gratitude, but recognition, like someone who had been invisible for too long had finally been noticed. Anna's heart swelled. She smiled gently, the corners of her eyes softening. Maybe, she whispered, her voice quiet, hesitant, hopeful. This doesn't have to be just one night. Daniel's expression shifted. A flicker of something. Hope, surprise, maybe even longing. The space between them was small now, not quite romantic yet, but on the edge. The air pulsed gently with things unspoken. He didn't touch her, but he didn't look away either. And Anna didn't turn to go, not yet, because something had begun tonight. Not dramatic, not loud, not flashy like in the movies, but real. Something built not from attraction alone, but from stories shared in whispers, in warm tea, in old griefs and new hopes. It was a new kind of night, and maybe the beginning of a new kind of love. Time, once frozen inside that quiet house, began to move again. Not in loud, dramatic ways, but in soft, steady rhythms. Like the slow blooming of spring after a long, hidden winter. Weeks passed, then months. And during that time, Anna Wilson and Daniel Reed became something more than strangers, more than a favor and a secret. They became companions, partners, maybe even healing. It began with simple things. Dinners cooked together in Daniel's once lonely kitchen, walks through quiet parks with fingers brushing, shared books passed back and forth like secret letters. They laughed more often, spoke more freely. Daniel started opening windows again. Anna began bringing flowers into the house, fresh wild ones from the market, setting them in vases near his mother's photo. That photo no longer stayed in the master bedroom. One sunny afternoon, Daniel moved it. Not to hide it, but to honor it. He placed it gently on the mantel in the living room, between a candle and an old book his mother had once read to him. When visitors came, neighbors, co-workers, even the curious, they saw it. Some paused. Some looked confused. And a few predictably whispered. There were looks, quiet glances, short conversations that ended when Daniel or Anna entered the room. But Daniel was no longer the silent man on the hill. When someone asked, "Is that your mother?" he no longer hesitated. "Yes," he said. "Her name was Michelle. She was brilliant, brave, and she's the reason I am who I am." And he said it not with anger, but with pride. The kind of pride that breaks chains. Anna, too, had changed. She no longer walked with her shoulders down. She held her head higher, not because her life had become easy, but because someone saw her, finally, and taught her that being seen didn't mean being judged. They stood side by side at small-town markets, at church picnics, at park benches where older folks narrowed their eyes and younger kids didn't care at all. Some people talked. Some shook their heads. But others, slowly, quietly, began to change. It was in the way the librarian asked about Daniel's mother's favorite books. It was in how the florist began setting aside sunflowers for Anna because your gentleman says you like them. It was in how one teenage girl, after seeing Anna and Daniel holding hands at the diner, walked up to Anna and whispered, "You two are really beautiful together." Because sometimes courage is contagious. Daniel and Anna didn't make speeches. They didn't hold signs or lead marches. They simply loved out loud. In a place that had once taught both of them to shrink, they stood tall, quietly, consistently, gently. And that small Georgia town, built on tradition and whispers, began to notice. Not overnight, not entirely, but cracks formed in the old stone walls, and through them light crept in. Daniel would sometimes sit in the living room and stare at the photo of his mother. He no longer did it with tears. He did it with gratitude, because now he was no longer hiding her. Now the world knew the truth, and the truth in the end had set something free. Anna would rest her head on his shoulder during those moments, not needing to speak, just being there. Different stories, different wounds, but one shared belief. That love should never be hidden, not for the sake of appearances, not to protect people's comfort, not to survive in a broken world. Love, in its truest form, demands to be seen, held, fought for. And Daniel and Anna fought, not with fists or fury, but with tenderness, with truth, with steady hearts that refused to be small. Their story became a quiet symbol in that town, not loud, but real. A whispered reminder that the walls we build out of fear are weaker than the bridges we build out of courage. And in the end, what started as one favor, one evening, one forbidden room, became the beginning of healing, of hope, of something real, a love that bloomed where it was never supposed to grow. And two hearts, once hidden in silence, finally found their voice in each other.